we're going to be turning our focus to the impact of emerging market indices following the Britain's decision to obviously vote to leave the EU. Mandlakazi Ngasamba, the financial officer at Cloud Atlas Investing, is joining us at the desk. Of course, Piru is still here. Mandlakazi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We've been talking about the impact of the Brexit vote, and we've seen this play out in global markets, European markets, US markets. And I think the question comes, have we been seeing a divergence or a difference from how developed markets have been responding versus developing emerging markets or even frontier markets?
Yeah, I think that's something every investor would be interested in finding out. I think no one was left unscathed with the Brexit incident. Everyone was affected. Even Africa was affected by Brexit negatively. But there were certain countries that did really well, that were exporting, like Zambia. They actually benefited from Brexit. Europe also, Egypt also benefited from Brexit as well. A lot of countries didn't do so well, but they actually, I think post-Brexit, they actually started recovering. Even the rand started strengthening and doing well after the whole Brexit incident. I think the biggest challenge, that Africa is facing right now is just, I think it's the investor sentiment. I think investors are becoming more risk averse now, and they're shunning away from Africa, which is deemed to be risky. I think it's not really risky as such. I think investors need to take a step back and maybe define the word risky. I think if I have to take it back to my experience, I'm from the Eastern Cape. Before I went to Joburg, I thought Soweto was risky based on the information that was in the media about Soweto, the perception around Soweto. But when I actually went to Joburg, I was like, okay, Soweto is actually not that bad. If you look at the other townships in Joburg, so it is actually not really bad. So I think that's investor perception around Africa, where they look at what's in the media and perception. But if you look at the real numbers, Africa is actually doing really well. We're going to delve into those in a second. Maybe bring Piru in the discussion.
Mandlakazi, I want to ask you, having a look at that post-Brexit probably 2 weeks we've had, what country was the most negatively affected? I believe there were countries that saw their stock markets decline in double-digit figures and not recovered as of yet.
The Naira, I think immediately after that, you saw that the Naira devalued. And it's mostly those countries which their currency is pegged with the euro. So their currency got affected quite a bit. So, but there was mostly the Naira devaluation that did a bit badly. But it's recovered after that, which is a good thing.
Let's look at it again, just to bring it in the African context. You were saying that Zambia had had benefited from the
exports,
from the exports. In terms of what we've been seeing in the different stock markets across the African continent, what were maybe some of the other outperformers, and were there any particular sectors that that led to this? Because Zambia, as you mentioned, exports. Where else did we see really strong performance coming through?
I think really strong performance would have to be real estate. I think in Africa there are certain sectors that do really well, because the difference between Africa and developed economies is the fact that the growth with developed economies, especially after Brexit, was government induced. It's a stimulus from government. It's driven. But with the developing economy like Africa, they don't have enough resources to be able to drive that stimulus. So the growth that you've seen in the past years is due to real growth. So the assets in the assets that you've been investing in are real assets. Like as I said, with real estate, it's an actual asset that's growing. So with the developing economy, we have assets that are growing. There's huge potential, and I think the growth in comparison to developed economies is real, and it's still growing.
I want to call up just some of the graphs that you had sent through to us in terms of some of the indicators that would tell us a bit more about what is currently happening on the African landscape. I know that you're probably looking at healthcare. There may be specific sectors, but we'll bring that up for you in just a few moments. Piru, I'll bring you in here whilst we wait for that data to come up.
Yeah, and Mandlakazi, I think, hit the nail on the head there. Especially the developing countries at the moment, we don't have that fallback that the the rest of the world almost have, that the guys are trying to devalue their currency, we're almost trying to protect it. And that is a fine line, and especially with these shocks that we've seen lately, post-Brexit and whatever comes after that, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle. And the currencies at the moment, especially for a lot of African countries, exports is a big thing. That's going to be an important play, and we've seen almost the counter have, and where people start investing in countries that are exporting in precious metals, oils, gold, that type of thing.
Leslie, maybe just to to wrap up with, what do you think is the one thing that investors do need to know about investing on the African continent now, and where growth is going to be coming from? We mentioned the indices and the indicators that you've been watching. Where do you think we're going to be seeing the bulk of this growth coming from, and where the resilient sector is going to be?
Okay, I think high level with regards to growth in Africa, we've seen the numbers. I think Africa has been growing consistently, and it's growth that's still going to continue. And I think right now we're seeing a lot of economic growth in Africa, and it's not supported by the growth in the markets in Africa. They barely move in tangent or in tandem. So in this case, I think the economic growth is moving really high, but the market is moving behind it. And I think for investors, it's very crucial that they don't lag behind. They need to make sure that they grow the economic growth that doesn't outperform the markets. So it's very crucial that if you're an investor, invest now, because Africa is still growing, and you wouldn't want to get into a situation where you invest later on, where the market is already caught on. Then the returns that you're getting wouldn't be as big as the returns that you'd get if you invest now. So most investors want to speculate, and but I think Africa, if you want to invest in Africa, make sure that you invest now and invest long term.
We'll leave it there. Great place to leave it. Mandlakazi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. A very big thank you to Mandlakazi Ngasam. There we go. Financial Officer at Cloud Atlas Investing.